We'd like to continue this conversation with Douglas Ollivant, along with being a retired Army officer. He was the director for Iraq at the National Security Council during both the Bush and Obama administrations. Currently, he is a senior national security fellow and with the New American Foundation, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. Douglas, thank you so much for being here with us. I do appreciate it. This is what I want to start off with. So much to talk about and so little time to talk about it. But of course, the U.S. has set about with coalition building. Of course, our Congress has approved Obama's proposal for supporting and training moderate rebels in Syria. But sort of give us an appreciation for the minefield that the U.S. will have to navigate to identify the right moderates and to give them the support and the training that they really will need, because let's not forget, they've been fighting for 3 years now.
They have been, and you're right to identify Syria is a minefield. That's a great word. It's a menagerie of various groups in Syria. We have the Kurds fighting in the north, and they're their own thing, and we can talk about them another time. But then fighting in the Arab areas, we have at least 5 different groups. We have the regime itself with its allies, which we're opposed to, obviously. And then we have ISIL or ISIS or Daesh, which we obviously have some serious issues with. But then the next largest group is probably al-Nusra, which is the official al-Qaeda franchise in Syria. Clearly someone we also have some serious differences with. And then we have the Islamic Front, which self-describes itself as the Syrian Taliban. So again, a group we have some very serious difficulties with. And then last, we get to the Free Syrian Army, which of course is not without its own issues, but is a good enough force for us to work with. But they're also the smallest and the least militarily capable. And as you've pointed out, it's very difficult for us to vet them and know who they really are.
Indeed, and beside that, as I alluded to in the first question, again, these rebels have been fighting. They've been in a civil war for 3 years. Is it even possible? Are these rebels in any condition to fight adequately against the very well organized, very well financed ISIL?
Well, I think individually as groups they are, but the bulk of the Free Syrian Army consists of small groups, 250, 300 fighters that are protecting their own towns, villages, small areas. They're a great defensive force, and they do great work keeping ISIS from overrunning their own territory. But they just don't have the strength to come out and bring the fight to ISIS. Now, I think part of our plan is if we recruit them and train them and bring them weapons and bring them more money, there may be a bandwagoning effect, and other groups may defect and join the Free Syrian Army, and that would expand their ranks. But again, we need to look at the downside of this. We're then talking about having joined the Free Syrian Army groups that until last month were fighting with all the aforementioned groups. It's very complicated.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, much has been made of the president's promise that there will be no combat boots on the ground. I expect that he'll live up to that promise, or at least do his darn level best too. But will there be necessary other boots on the ground in the region beside the Iraqi force and the moderate Syrian rebels?
Well, aside from the aforementioned Kurds in both Iraq and Syria, I think the answer for now is no. Now, we know there are Iranian advisors with some of the Iraqi groups. We have advisors in Baghdad and in Erbil and at the brigade headquarters, not going forward to a place where they could see combat, at least not yet. So there are these other groups. I think the bulk of the fighting will be the Free Syrian Army, the Iraqi Army, and Kurds, both in Iraq and in Syria.
As we understand from one of our reporters for Arise News, Zach Badorf, who's just come back from Turkey, he, in his reporting and interviewing someone who was fighting with the Free Syrian Army, said that there are many rebels that are defecting from the Free Syrian Army, going over to fight for ISIL because, quite frankly, they have money. They get paid. What sort of threat and concern does that represent?
It's a very real threat. And I think part of the effort to reinforce our proxies, the moderate Free Syrian Army, is to reverse that trend and first stop that trend, stop the defections, and then to reverse it, to have the defections work from ISIL, from al-Nusra, from the Islamic Front back to the Free Syrian Army. But again, do you want someone who was fighting with ISIL just a few weeks ago to come back and fight with the Free Syrian Army? Again, this is very fraught, but I don't have a better alternative.
Yeah, indeed. Douglas, do you have any confidence in the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters fighting beyond what their own interest is in the northern territory of Iraq?
Well, that's part of the issue with this entire coalition is everyone, not just the Kurds, is fighting in their own interests. Look, everybody hates ISIL. That does unify everyone here. But ISIL is no one's, maybe with the exception of Baghdad and the Iraqi armies, no one's first priority. You know, the Kurds are willing to fight ISIL, but they probably care more about Kurdistan. The Free Syrian Army is willing to fight ISIL, but they care more about overthrowing the Assad regime. You know, the Saudis and the Iranians both hate ISIL. But I think the Saudis still hate the Iranians more than they hate ISIL. And the Iranians still hate the Saudis more than they hate ISIL. And so it's everyone's second-tier hated person. And that's going to make the herding of the cats in this coalition incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I love that characterization. I think you're exactly right. We're in the bonus round. I'm all out of time, Doug, but I want to squeeze this in very briefly.
Sure.
How much confidence do you have in the brand new formed government in Iraq to provide the stability to really form a defense against ISIS?
The degree of difficulty in Iraq is exponentially high, but the early signs are good.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much. Douglas Ollivant, it's a great pleasure talking to you. I hope we get to talk again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.